DC here. Hi guys and gals. Well, Monday evening. I don't quite know what time it is right now. It must be close to 8. That's 8:30 almost. Yeah. So I hope you all had a nice weekend. And we're getting into the cool of the day, if I can call it that way. But we're coming into a week of storms. At least if the weather forecast is right, it's going to be a whole week of storms. So, yeah, let's see about that. So, what was I going to chat about today? Well, I was walking back home and seeing the children play up in one of our suburbs, which I walk through. And it was reminding me of when I was a kid and we would live in a village. I mean, the village I was born in, I have said it in other videos, there was about a total of 300 people. And then when my parents, when I was quite young, we moved to the village next door, which was called Sutton. And Sutton at that time was, a bit more than 1,000 people. Now with the countryside, which they've incorporated into the town, they're close to 3,000, but the village itself is probably similar. Anyway, it was around 1,000, 1,100, something like that. Not much more, if ever. Why I'm bringing all that up is like the town that we live in here, it's about, I guess with the suburbs, which are stuck together and everything, we're like 40, 50,000. But we live on the outskirts of town, so it feels much more like the countryside, albeit when you're on the other side of the house, there's our bus line, and so that makes quite a bit of noise depending on the time, because the bus is every 15 minutes. Yeah, so I'm bringing all that up to talk about country living versus city living, and this is kind of like in the middle somewhere. But when I was a kid, it was like really living in a village. I was thinking, like, what is the difference between the village life and today's city life? Well, for one thing, I think is that there was differences in the way that people interacted with each other. To say that there was no bigotry, that there was no racism. Well, we didn't have actually much else than. Let me just zoom in just a little bit. We didn't have much else than lily white people. So I mean, there wasn't that much as far as racism went. But what we did have, we had the language barrier. The town I was brought up is on the Vermont border. But so we had at that period, so we're talking like in the early 60s and so on, there was still about 50% English-speaking people in town. Even more, well, at least 50. And 50% French-speaking people. Now, did they hate each other? Well, they didn't always like each other, put it that way. But there was a lot of intermarriage. My parents are a good example. And it is funny, though, because at that time, it was just about the same as interracial marriage. I'm barely exaggerating there. Because very often there was different religious groups. I mean, like my dad was from Catholic background. My mom was Anglican, so Protestant. So already there, usually, I mean, the Catholics, it's not that they weren't English-speaking Catholics, but like in our village, the majority of the Catholics were French-speaking, and the majority of the English-speaking people were Protestant of different denominations, and so on. So there was that type of separation or racism, if you want to call it whatever you want, but lack of let's say understanding. Today, with political correctness, bigotry has shifted. I mean, the bigotry and you have to be like I am has basically moved over to the PC world. And in that respect, it's no better. I would say that people in general, the society, I should put it that way, in society in general, is just as bigoted and one-sided and hateful. And frankly, if you ask me, I would go a lot further. I would say it's a lot more. Now, I mean, we all know what's been happening in the last weeks, months. There's a lot of discussions about how the things get that way. Well, a lot of it, I really would say, has to do with not talking with each other. And when you are talking with each other, it's, that's not speech. It's hatred spewing out. Anyway, but let's get back to when I was in the village. I mean, how would we get along? It was kind of funny because, when you're in a village, I think all of you have learned to, who were brought up in villages. I mean, there's very often a community spirit that's pretty strong. It can be around sports like the softball teams or basically like some people just basically going to the bar or whatever. But there was also, when I was a kid, there was very much for example, in the winter, the snowmobile groups. I wouldn't call them teams, but they're clubs, and we would have rallies and stuff like that. And when we go out on these rallies, you'd always end up, there was like kind of dedicated. Usually it was a bar, a hotel, or a restaurant that was like also a lodge for the snowmobile clubs. My father-in-law had a little. Oh, we're gonna have a thunderstorm coming. My father-in-law had one of those such little lodges at his farm. It wasn't a restaurant or anything, but he had a little place where he had some place you could have some drinks and so on. So my dad would bring us over, and that is where I proposed to Mrs. Deasy a long time ago. Yeah. And so great memories with this community spirit thing. We would also have, when it was Memorial Day or the cenotaph, all the churches got together and would have something going on. There would usually be, turkey or chicken pot pie suppers at the different churches, and we had different groups, like would have card games. We would have tombolas in the city square. There was always something going on, and it's funny because I know we have things going on here, but it's a big city, so when you go there, you might not know you do not know most of the people, but when you're in a village, you have almost very often the same type of activities, but you know the people. So, as kids, we get all excited about different things. At Christmas time, Santa would come and bring toys for the kids. That was the Knights of Columbus. So you see another type of group. That was the Knights of Columbus that always used to organize it. And by the way, the secret is that one of my uncles is Santa Claus. Yes, he was. I saw him put on that beard. And then, what else? Well, there was a fireman. The other one of my uncles, he was the assistant chief fireman at the fire brigade for many years. Yeah. So, there was just kind of this village thing where everybody knew who else everybody else was. It wasn't always a good thing, and there was the rich family. Of course, there was a couple of those, but one that was really the dominant rich family. And of course, you would even see that in class, in school. They were always preferred. Let's just put it that way. I wasn't very good at sports, so when it came to the usual not basketball. We had very little basketball. We had soccer. I have to say soccer because when I was a kid, we said soccer. European football. We never said it that way. We said soccer and softball. And what I was good at the time was running. I could actually sprint pretty fast. Maybe that's why my first son was such a good sprinter. I mean, he was the 100, 200, and 800 meters actually here. He got a lot of prizes. He was even one of the cantonal champs at one time. But I digress. what am I getting at? I think the thing is that all of this reminiscing is bringing back, like, in my head, all those good moments. Were there bad ones? Of course there were, but it was a completely other dimension. I mean, there were some fights. I'm not saying there weren't. I mean, but I can think of some when I was a kid. I don't know how much they were in the with the adults. I mean, we didn't hear that often about, attacks or murders or stuff like that. It was pretty rare. Mostly, I mean, if there was something that happened, a drama, it was usually related to maybe drunken driving or something like that. But rarely household violence. I'm certain it did exist, but yeah, it was definitely less. What else? Well, I don't know. For the moment, I think I'll keep it there. Bring some of those reminiscences, maybe some more particular ones in another vlog. Just kind of getting myself going about remembering things and stuff that were fun as a kid. Maybe you can put in a few in the comments of stuff that you really remember as being brought up maybe in a village or somewhere else. Some of you grew in Army or Navy or whatever bases. There's certainly some very special experiences that happened there as well. Yeah, DC's going to be signing off. That's it. That's all. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.